The following podcast is a live recording of a radio show first broadcast by FreshFM with assistance from New Zealand On Air. FreshFM is a community access media station based in Te Tauihu, the top of the South Island, New Zealand.
Hello and good morning, everyone. Welcome to Fix the Money, Fix the World, where we talk about all things economics and how that affects your daily spending, your habits, your savings. Basically, all that stuff we keep hearing about in the news, and we think, well, how does that affect me? As an American news podcasters like to say, and how that affects your weekend? Well, how does this affect your wallet? So today on Fix the Money, Fix the World, I am your host, Faris Mali. This show is brought to you by myprivacy.help. Do you have a life online? Well, learn how to keep that safe and secure. Go to www.myprivacy.help. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is the economics of electric vehicles. So I heard someone say recently, we can't afford to buy an electric vehicle. And that seemed to be the only stopping point for them not purchasing one. I thought, okay, let's look into the economics of that. And we're going to look into a lot of criticisms of EVs, particularly the materials, components, and natural resources that are used to mine them. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole into electronic vehicles. For now, let's start us off with a song, and we are going to listen to All the Money or the Simple Life, Honey by the Dandy Warhols. Thank you, the Dandy Warhols. That was All the Money or the Simple Life. Dandy Warhol is probably one of my favorite names for a band. All right, now we are on Fresh FM, talking Fix the Money, Fix the World, and we are talking about the cost of EV ownerships. So, what we're going to do, and I kind of came up with my own spreadsheet here, and I've gone down a bit of a rabbit hole. The average Kiwi drives 38 kilometers a day. I personally do twice that much, but we're going to go off of that for our base. So if you're driving 38 kilometers a day in fuel, and this is petrol priced at $2.50, you would be spending $3,150 a year in fuel. Apparently, the average cost of maintaining, that's servicing a car, is $750 for an ICM. When I say ICM, that's internal combustion engine. ICE, not ICM, internal combustion engine versus EV, which is electronic vehicle. So EV, battery-powered rechargeable car. ICE is internal combustion engine, which has been around since the Model T Ford. So if you were to drive, so the annual cost of driving and maintaining an ICE car is $3,900. An EV, if you were to charge that at home, it's anywhere from $1 to $3 a night, charging it at home overnight, and that will come to $321 per annum. The maintenance on an EV depends on it, but I put $170 because that's basically what I paid for mine, which is a Nissan Leaf. So the annual cost for an EV is $491. That is in charging and maintenance. For fuel, for an ICE, that's fuel and maintenance, is $3,900. So you're seeing a $3,400 difference, $3,410 difference in an EV. Now, what I haven't included there is tires, because regardless of how much you're driving, you're probably going to go through tires the same. And I haven't included on-road costs such as registration and all that, because they're comparatively the same. So per annum, if you are driving 38 kilometers per day, you will be saving yourself $3,400 on an EV. Now, the more you drive, the more you'll make up in those savings. So that's based on 38 kilometers per day. Now, what happens if you drive more? Well, the cost of charging is not going to go up more. That cost in there is basically overnight charging from 0 to 100%. So you need to factor in things like range, for example. So if you some EVs these days, so the first generation Nissan Leaf that came out in 2009, they'll get you about 100 Ks. So that will easily cover that daily drive. The next generation, which is a 40 kilowatt hour battery, that would get you about 200 kilometers. So that should easily cover most people's commutes. So the more you drive, the more you're going to save because that's fuel that you're not spending on. Now, I did this personally. I have 2 cars. I've got a Subaru internal combustion engine car, and I've also got a Nissan Leaf. The Nissan Leaf I basically just use every day. I had that for 20 months, and I covered just shy of 20,000 kilometers on that. And I know it saved me just shy of $10,000 over 20 months. So that was a savings for me, $10,000 over 20 months. And actually, before I bought it, did the math. This is how much driving I'm intending on doing for the next 4 years. I figured if petrol prices stayed the same, if they did not go up, then the car would pay for itself in 3.5 years. That was the math that I did based on my driving habits. Now, what you need to consider if you're looking at buying one is they don't like the cold. So I've found that I will lose 15 to 20% of my range in cold weather. So those early morning school runs in the winter, you're not going to get that range. The other thing is if you go, okay, I might just buy one of the early generation Leafs, which you can get for about 10 grand now, or even less. And I'm just going to use it. 100 kilometers will be fine. You need to take into account battery degradation because that might be 100 Ks now, but you're going to lose some of that over time. So I would give yourself a 20% leeway. So add 20% to what you need. So if you only need 100 kilometers per day, add 20% just to factor in that battery degradation. So we've just been talking about personally, what is it worth to you? So the cost for an average Kiwi driver for an electric vehicle, you're going to save $3,400 a year if you're driving 38 kilometers per day. Now, I might have to throw this in here. This is not financial advice. Do your own homework. Do your own due diligence. This is just me going off math and statistics. If you drive more than that, then the savings will precipitate. They'll increase. Another thing, just from personal experience, is avoid excessive rapid charging. So I plug mine in overnight. I didn't charge it rapidly simply because one is it's not that good for the battery's health if you rapid charge it all the time. A lot of the rapid chargers are actually set to max out at 80% because at 80 to 100%, and it's the same with your phone. That last 20% takes long to recharge because that makes your lithium-ion batteries last longer if they take that recharge slowly, that last 20%. So if you are thinking, okay, I'll get a 100 kilometer an hour one, I'll rapidly recharge, and that cost, the most I've paid is $7 to rapidly recharge mine, and that was going from pretty low to almost 100%. Most of the time, it's about $4 to get about 60% charge on it. I would not make that part of your strategy to go, okay, treat it like running into the petrol station and charging your car because it will degrade over time. It takes longer. It can take 20 minutes to 40 minutes, and also availability can be an issue. There's a lot of these things available in the North Island. In the South Island, there's not many. I'm in the Nelson region, and I've never taken my EV outside of Nelson for this reason because I just don't want to rely on a rapid charger. You can get there. There can be only one rapid charger, and it might not be working, and you're stuck. So don't have that as part of your strategy to regularly rapid charge. All right, so that's my advice on personal ownership. Do the math, and you can contact me as well if you want my spreadsheet. Go to www.farismali.com. That's FARISMALI. Okay, now let's talk about the big picture of EVs. So there was a few really good reports I'm going to link in here. They're from the United Nations. And let me read this out. Okay, this was actually from the International Energy Agency, the one I'm about to read now. So the International Energy Agency did a global EV Outlook 2022. So this was, I'm just going to read this out because it's quite concise and helpful. All right, so quoting now, few areas in the world of clean energy are as dynamic as the electric car market. Sales of electric vehicles doubled in 2021 from the previous year to a new record of 6.6 million. Back in 2012, just 120,000 electric cars were sold worldwide. In 2021, more than that many are sold each week. Nearly 10% of global car sales were electric in 2021, 4 times the market share in 2019. This brought the total number of electric cars on the world's roads to about 16.5 million, triple the amount in 2018. Global sales of electric cars have kept rising strongly in 2022, with 2 million sold in the first quarter, up 75% from the same period 2021. The success of EVs is being driven by multiple factors. Sustained policy support is the main pillar. Public spending on subsidies and incentives for EVs nearly doubled in 2021 to nearly US $30 billion. A growing number of countries have pledged to phase out internal combustion engines or have ambitious vehicle electrification targets for the coming decades. Meanwhile, many car makers have plans to electrify their fleets that go further than policy targets. Finally, 5 times more new EV models were available in 2021 than in 2015, increasing the attractiveness for consumers. The number of EV models available on the market is around 450. All right, and quote, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit here. So basically, we have just seen huge growth in the electric vehicle market. What that's led to is more companies coming out and saying, okay, Tesla has actually been incredibly popular. They're the first ones to really corner this market. And we've then seen more and more car makers come in. You might remember the hybrid came out, the Toyota Prius, and that really was your only option. And it was, personal opinion, a heinous looking car. You drove it because you wanted to let everyone know you're driving a Prius. So Tesla decided to make EVs sexy, and their plan was essentially get the rich people on board first who are willing to spend a 20 to 25% premium on an electric car to basically say, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing to support the environment. Once we get their money, then we can launch a mass manufactured car, which was a Tesla Model 3. So there are 450 different types of EV vehicles available. Most of those you'll find are actually in China. Because of China's air pollution issues, they're moving really strong to electric vehicles. You will see some in New Zealand now called BYD, Build Your Dreams. That is actually a significantly cost-effective car. I've not driven one. I don't know much about it. I just know price comparison. It's actually cheaper than most other EVs out there, brand new. All right. I'm going back into the report now from the International Energy Agency. The increase in EV sales in 2021 was primarily led by the People's Republic of China, which accounted for half of the growth. More vehicles were sold in China in 2021, that's 3.3 million vehicles, than in the entire world in 2020. Sales in Europe showed continued robust growth, up 65% to 2.3 million after a 2020 boom, and they increased in the United States as well after 2 years of decline. The first quarter of 2022 showed similar results, with sales in China more than doubling compared with the first quarter of 2021, accounting for most of global growth, a 60% increase in the United States and 25% increase in Europe. So we have just seen growth in EVs. This is basically what we're seeing. We've seen the people are demanding it. They want an alternative. And one of the things I actually really appreciate is I cannot tolerate the smell of fumes. This is why I've used push mowers instead of regular petrol two-stroke motors, because I just hate the smell of fumes. It makes me feel nauseous. So me not going to a petrol station is something I truly appreciate. All right, I'm going to give my voice another rest here before we move on to the resources and potential detrimental side effects of EVs. That was Steady As She Goes by the Raconteurs. If you are just joining us, this is Fix the Money, Fix the World, coming to you on FreshFM. Now, we've been talking about the economics of EV ownership, electric vehicle ownerships versus ICE, internal combustion engine. We've just gone through the growth of EVs, how much they're selling, how many units are being selling, and the fact that it's just incredible demand, exponential demand. Now we're going to look at some of the problems that has. So I'm quoting from the report by the International Energy Agency, their 2022 EV Outlook. I'm going to start reading again, quoting now. Prices of raw materials such as cobalt, lithium, and nickel have surged. In May 2022, lithium prices were over seven times higher than at the start of 2021. Unprecedented battery demand and a lack of structural investment in new supply capacity are key factors. Right then. So today's battery supply chains are concentrated around China, which produces 3/4 of all lithium-ion batteries and is home to 70% of production capacity for cathodes and 85% of production capacity for anodes. Both are key components of batteries. Over half of lithium, cobalt, and graphite processing and refining capacity is located in China. Europe is responsible for over 1/4 of global EV production, but is home to very little of the supply chain apart from cobalt processing at 20%. Both Korea and Japan have considerable shares of the supply chain downstream of raw material processing, particularly in highly technical cathode and anode material production. Korea is responsible for 15% of cathode material production capacity, while Japan accounts for 14% and 11%. Korean and Japanese companies are also involved in production of other battery components, such as separators. Now, I've sped through that a bit, but basically what you need to know is the materials required for processing the batteries are concentrated mainly in China. And this is why you do have a lot of the cars being offered in China, which would be cheaper than they are overseas. Because what we've seen since the global government lockdowns and the Russia-Ukraine war is we've just seen those supply chain disruptions, which has led to increased cost of that. Now, one of the things that was mentioned earlier was subsidies. So there is a subsidy here that if you buy an EV, you can get anywhere from $3,400 for a used car if it's the first time being driven in New Zealand, or $7,000 or $8,000 rebate for a brand new one. Check the math on that. Personally, I am not for rebates because what actually happened was when those rebates came out, the government said, okay, we're going to give you $3,000 to buy an EV. Well, people just went, okay, I'm going to buy an EV. All it did was raise the cost of the car. It made no difference. All it basically did was take money from one taxpayer and put it into the hands of another. That's my quick one on government subsidies. All right, we're going to look into mining now. So I'm quoting from this report again. Mining generally takes place in resource-rich countries such as Australia, Chile, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and is handled by a few major companies. Governments in Europe and the U.S. have bold public sector initiatives to develop domestic battery supply chains, but the majority of the supply chain is likely to remain Chinese through 2030. For example, 70% of battery production capacity announced for the period to 2030 is in China. So the issue that we have is the cobalt that we mentioned before and the nickel that you need for these batteries are in Australia, Chile, and Congo. And only a few companies are involved. And 70% of battery production, so this is taking the raw materials and creating the battery, will still take place in China until the year 2030. Okay, that's it with that report. Now I'm going to move on to the mining aspects of this. So that's the raw materials. And this is from United Nations report, the Conference on Trade and Development. And I'm quoting now. The report says the adverse environmental impact could be reduced by investing more in sustainable mining techniques and technologies that can recycle and more effectively the raw materials found in spent lithium-ion batteries. It recommends that the industry find ways to reduce the need for mining in the first place. For example, scientists are testing the possibility of replacing graphite in the batteries with widely available silicon. So what they're actually saying here is we need to look at ways of changing the way we make lithium-ion batteries. So remember, lithium-ion batteries are not just in EVs. They're in your phones. And there's more phones than people on the planet. And how many of you have phones just sitting in a drawer at home that you haven't recycled? Make sure you recycle those phones. There are materials in there. Obviously, clear your phone. Have no private information in there. Do a factory reset of the phone and get it recycled. All right, I'm going back to this report from the UN. Nearly 50% of world cobalt reserves are in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which accounts for over 2/3 of global production of the mineral. About 20% of cobalt sourced from the Central African nation comes from artisanal mines, where some 40,000 children work in extremely dangerous conditions, according to UNICEF, the UN's child agency. The dust from excavation may contain toxic metals, including uranium, that are linked to health problems such as respiration disease and birth defects. So this is one of the problems that we have, is that the natural resource needed for the cobalt for EVs is unfortunately coming from a place where children are involved in digging it up from the ground. This is what's been reported. So we are aware of this, and this is obviously an issue. So what has been going on now? Okay, I'm going to go back to this report. So, owing to the high cost and limited availability of the principal materials, that's the cobalt and nickel we're talking about, used in lithium-ion batteries, research is ongoing for different cathode chemistries that have less reliance on the critical materials currently used in manufacturing them. Furthermore, improvements have been made to the materials currently used in cathodes, which has led to increased battery life through some combination of NMC. So what we're going to do here is basically what's happening is the industry has basically said the way we make these batteries is causing two problems. We're using a resource that is finite and that is not safe to extract from the planet, and it's basically harming children. The other problem is, at the end of the life, we can't recycle these very well. So when they put these batteries together, they were not thinking at the end of the battery life, how do we recycle it? So they're saying, okay, we need to figure this out. We need to think of the long term, recycling the battery and using less of the cobalt. This is a report from SAE. Now, SAE publishes reports by engineers and technicians in the automotive and aeronautics industry, amongst others. Was actually a really good report. Lithium is heavily sourced through evaporation process in arid basins in Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia. And according to the Natural Resources Defense Council, the practice contributes to the ecological damage of internationally recognized wetlands and protected areas where water resources are already exhausted for local and indigenous peoples. Many of these communities have no say in and receive little benefit from the mining operations. More than 70% of the world's cobalt comes from the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, where there are severe child labor issues, ongoing human rights abuses, and horrendous working conditions with minimal safety. So we've gone through this, and it has obviously been confirmed by other sources. Like lithium, cobalt is mostly refined in China, and Chinese companies operating through the massive Belt and Road. The metal remains a flashpoint. Cobalt is a dead man walking in lithium-ion batteries, said Louis Black, who heads Almonte Partners and has a 15-year experience in mining tungsten, another battery metal with a 50% recycled supply. The battery industry, aware of these issues, has steadily reduced the amount of cobalt in its cells, but so far remains an essential metal. Nickel, also problematic, is often mined in an environmentally destructive way. The massive Chinese-owned Ramu nickel mine in Papua New Guinea, for instance, was estimated to dump 680,000 tons of waste into Besamuk Bay annually, leading to a $5.2 billion lawsuit from local coalition. More sustainable lithium mining, including U.S. domestic supplies, under development. All right, so that's the end of that report. So basically, they're aware that, yep, what we're doing with these batteries is getting the raw material is a problem. And this is something that Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, actually addressed. I'm reading from a report which I'll link here. Over the last few years, CEO Elon Musk has said multiple times that Tesla plans to shift more electric cars to LFP, which is iron phosphate batteries, in order to overcome nickel and cobalt supply concerns. Iron phosphate LFP batteries don't use nickel or cobalt, are traditionally cheaper and safer, but they offer less energy density, which means less efficient and shorter range for electric vehicles. Tesla has already moved its standard range Model 3 and Model Y produced in China to LFP cells. So Tesla's going, okay, the price of cobalt, the price of creating these lithium-ion batteries is getting more expensive. It went up 7 times, which as a business hurts your bottom line, obviously. And they're looking at the environmental and human rights issues, and they've decided, what can we do? So here's where I want to jump in and make some comparisons here. So we've been driving internal combustion cars since the 1900s. Electric cars were actually invented in the 1850s. We've had electric trams and trains for a very long time. There are documentaries out there saying how we could have had the electric car on roads far sooner, but petrol companies and car companies were essentially buying out the rights or the technology if anyone would put in a patent. And look, don't quote me on this here. I'm not going to say any company specifically because I don't want to get sued, but this is just from what I've been told in some limited research. They would buy out the technology and sit on it. They wouldn't let mass manufacturing of electric cars happen because that hurt their businesses. So it's only in the last decade that we've actually had an alternative to ICE, internal combustion engines. Now, we can't say that internal combustion engines don't come clean either. I'm talking about getting petrol. I lived in the Middle East, and I know that we've seen wars in Iraq, Kuwait, Libya. We've had internal strife in Venezuela because of demand and control of oil. So we've had a history of wars to control oil. Now, the EV community, to its credit, is aware of shortcomings and they're doing something about them. So 100 years later, we are still essentially had wars for oil, and we're not really looking at an alternative to that. We want to control oil, but now the EVs are like, okay, yep, we've been doing this for 15 years now. What is the problem? The problem is where we're getting the cobalt and the nickel from, and they're addressing issues. So I kind of want to give them the credit there that it's only taken 15 years for them to see where these batteries come from. The raw materials are a concern, an environmental and a human child labor concern, and they're doing something about it. All right. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention. If you're looking at buying an EV, you need to check what's called the status of health, SOH, and get this independently verified. What that does is it shows the battery degradation. So I talked before about if you're buying an EV, make sure you get one that has greater range than what you need for today, because the battery will degenerate. So you can actually get that tested. And some cars, it will show you there's 85% SOH, statement of health, which basically means it's running at 85% of what the original capacity was. So yeah, always get that tested. That's kind of like checking for mileage on a car or how often it's been serviced, how well it's been taken care of. The more you rapidly charge that EV, the faster you're going to degrade that battery. So avoid doing that. And if you see a new car, it's already got a pretty poor SOH. It means they've just rapid charged it a lot. All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning in for Fix the Money, Fix the World with Faris Mali. A thank you to our sponsor, myprivacy.help.
The podcast you just listened to was a live recording of a radio show, first broadcast on FreshFM, the top of the South's community access media station, with support from New Zealand On Air. The funding of Access Media makes these podcasts possible. To find similar programs by other community access media stations, go online to accessmedia.nz. If you or your group would like to know more about how you can have a program on our station, please contact us. Visit our website freshfm.net for our contact details.